Cornfields for miles on end, back roads, gravel roads, family farms, passed from generation to generation, star-studded skies, small towns, really small towns. People know people. People know everything about people. Life is slower. Traffic is slower. You may have a stoplight. You may not even have a stop sign. People are friendly, kind, hardworking. People wave at you as they pass by. People are conservative. People are set in their ways. Coffee talk at the local Casey's gas station is the life of the retired. A place where politics, religion, and the latest gossip are dissected. Ford, Chevy, Dodge Ram. Trucks are king. They rule the streets. Fairway or Hy-Vee. You have to choose one or the other. You can't have both. Some call it the Hawkeye State, but others would claim the Cyclone State. Again, you have to choose. Iowa or Iowa State. Friday night lights in the fall. Hoops and wrestling in the winter. Wrestling is God. Track in the spring. Baseball in the summer. Seasons change. Colors change. The people remain the same. Down to earth. Caring. Helpful. This is Iowa. This is the Midwest. This will always be home, no matter where my soul may roam. And with that being read, I want to welcome you back to the 127 Fit Podcast. Today's guest is a husband, father, science teacher, runner, fellow podcaster, and fellow Iowan. Today's guest is Chris Ward. Chris, I want to welcome you to the 127 Fit Podcast.
Thanks, man. I have so much to say about just your intro. The waving to everybody.
Yep.
That's a problem in an ultra race. Especially like if it's an out and back and you see everyone coming back. Right, I have to wave to everybody.
Right.
I feel like I have to. Because I'm like...
All I know, man, is like when you live in a big city and then you go back to Iowa or the Midwest and you have like, usually it's like a farm or something and they'll just give you like the one finger off the steering wheel. Like it catches me off guard, dude, because the only one finger you're getting in a big city is the middle finger. And it's just like, it just takes me time to adjust to somebody waving or giving the pointer finger like little wave thing, because again, it's just like when I see somebody wave at me and I'm driving by, it's like my brain kind of freezes. I'm like, and then when I go to wave back, it's like, dude, it's already passed. You know what I mean? You don't know about that stuff unless you're from Iowa or the Midwest, man. Like people are so down to earth, and people are just like waving randomly, and it's like, dude, this is weird.
Well, man. before we were starting, I was telling about the half marathon I ran last weekend.
Yeah.
And we started like 30 minutes after the first group to go. Okay. So we're passing people as we go, and I'm like, I'm that guy who is having to say, like, keep going, good job, to every single person I passed, even though I'm like out of breath. Right. And then every worker, I'm like, thank you. So,
but dude, it's good. It's good though, man. Like, you know, I hear a lot of people outside of like the Midwest. They always talk about Midwest people as being like specifically hardworking, but I think also, you know, just being down to earth. You know what I mean, kind, and it's just something that I feel like is lacking. You know, in general, just. You know, in the world, it seems like whenever you go back home to Iowa or the Midwest, dude, it's just different people. You know what I mean? Just real, genuine, and again, I like to use the word down to earth. You know what I mean? So,
I would think it's like kind of like an empathy piece where you're like you're conscious of how you're coming across to other people,
right,
which is really good in the most circumstances. Right. But you know, that also can be kind of taken to the extreme where it's like, oh man, this is kind of like maybe not the best thing. For
right. Yeah. So let's start off with something that I had in that little reading there. Are you a fairway guy or a Hy-Vee guy?
So in Muscatine, Iowa, where I grew up, when I was growing up, there was only Hy-Vee.
Okay.
Like Hy-Vee, there was like 2 Hy-Vees in town, and they finally opened a fairway like halfway through.
Okay.
So I guess this is such a cop-out answer. I'm like kind of both, because then in college I lived like a block from Fairway.
Okay.
So I would walk over there all the time.
Yeah.
Like every single day I would go grab dinner from fairway.
Yeah. So. Well, my dad, I grew up in Cherokee, Iowa, and the reason why we ended up in Cherokee from Ames, Iowa, is because that was my dad's first manager's position for fairway. So so I grew up brainwashed to like fairway, cheaper prices, all the the pluses of fairway, and Hy-Vee was like the enemy. But now when I go back to that area, and Hy-Vee's actually branched out, they're in South Dakota and spreading, and fairway actually is in South Dakota too now. But the big thing for me now, when I go back and there's Hy-Vee's around, I love Hy-Vee because the bigger ones are open 24 hours. They've got everything you would ever want. They've got all the organic stuff, dude. And I think their prices are a little bit more expensive, but also they're open on Sundays, which I respect Fairway for not being open on Sundays. But a lot of times, dude, my grocery shopping, especially in the past, it's gonna happen on Sundays. So it's like, dude, Hy-Vee's where it's at for me nowadays. But I
gotta give you props. Casey's breakfast pizza. That's the best thing in the world.
Casey's the real deal. Like, that's when we had a pizza at Godfather's, and then the Casey gas station in my hometown growing up. And dude, we'd go to Pizza Hut every once in a while, Godfather's, but dude, like the Casey's pizza is like a hidden gem.
I know.
It's real. And then you can rip off the box tops, dude, and get like a free pizza after like 20 or something.
That's awesome.
It's just Iowa stuff, man. Only Iowans understand that.
That's right.
And then also let's find out from you, Chris. Is it a Hawkeye state or a Cyclone state?
I'm pointing at my sweatshirt.
You got Iowa City. There you go.
I got the wave,
and
man.
You went to. I already knew it because you said you told me before we started recording that you went to the University of Iowa.
No,
so I already knew that. But for the listeners,
I know I'm a Hawkeye for sure. I remember my dad got us. We didn't have season tickets the whole time growing up, but we were like 40 minutes away from Iowa City.
Okay.
And he got us season tickets in the 2002 Iowa Hawkeye football season.
Okay.
Which is when the only team they lost to was Iowa State.
Oh, really?
Do you remember that?
Dude,
they were undefeated.
Do, but I can't.
Like undefeated the whole season. Second runner up to the Heisman that year. Had Dallas Clark as a tight end.
Okay.
And they lost to Iowa State. Like halfway through the game, they blew it, and I was like, but from that point forward, like that became like a really big deal to me and my dad and my friends.
Just kind of a family tradition
thing. Yeah, kind of, but it was weird because it was like a family tradition. We didn't start till like sophomore year of high school.
That's cool though. So, sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So let's just since we both have that connection of being from Iowa, and then the other cool connection that we have, we're both middle school teachers, and we'll touch on that here in a little bit. But let's just talk about maybe your upbringing a little bit, Chris. Kind of just talk about family life a little bit, growing up in Iowa, where you grew up, just kind of your time maybe playing sports, then going off to college. Just give us a little background of life in Iowa for Chris Ward.
Yeah, so growing up, Muscatine was my home. It's right on the Mississippi River. It's a fairly big town. I mean, it's not like a giant city by any means, but second home kind of was in southern Iowa in Keosauqua.
Okay.
And my dad owned like 180 acres down there. He was like a big time hunter, like with all of his friends. He would go down there hunting and fishing. And so he would take me down, and I would literally just hang out in the cabin or play in the field for like hours, you know? And, it's weird to think about like just taking a kid and like I was probably late elementary, like early middle school at the time, so I could like handle myself. Mm-hmm. But like just letting a kid roam around the woods is a weird thing to think about, but that was actually really meaningful to me. And kind of the path I ended up taking and like the activities I ended up enjoying. And at the time, I'm a kid, like I want to play video games and I want to watch movies. Right. And I'm in this, like we're at this cabin where there's no electricity. And so it might seem kind of boring, but then you have to like figure out what to do, like you have to entertain yourself. And I think that's actually like a really important skill for kids to learn.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So yeah. And then sports wise, I remember I would play soccer as a kid. But I started playing hockey, and my dad made me come down the stairs one day, and he was watching Mighty Ducks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he's like,
that was a great movie,
he's like, and now I think back, I'm like, I think he did this intentionally, like, because he was like, oh, this movie's on, maybe you'll like it. And we watched all of Mighty Ducks, which is an awesome movie. Right. And then he turns to me, he's like, they're starting a hockey team in Davenport for kids. Do you want to play? And I was like, of course I do. I just watched Mighty Ducks.
Right, you're all jacked
and
up.
So he signed me up in 2nd grade, and I was the only person in my town that would play hockey. Mm-hmm. And so they would take me up. I'm like, man, it's been a ridiculous amount of hours driving me 40 minutes to Davenport 3 times a week to go to practice and play. But yeah, so that was kind of my big sport growing up. And
cool.
It made me, I was an only child too. So only child, kind of shy, fairly smart at school and like fairly good at stuff, but not like the standout.
Right.
And so to have hockey, to have this sport that made me feel special because I was the only person that did it in town, was super, like looking back too, I've done a lot of reflecting over the last few years. I'm like, that meant so much to me because, as a kid who like was just a fairly normal kid, having something like some area where you stuck out, like you were able to like excel at, was really important as well. So
it was I'm sure it was like a confidence booster and just
totally
self-esteem and just like, this is my thing and nobody else is doing it. And
well, because then all the birthday parties were at Skateland,
right? Okay.
And I'm like,
you were a stud then.
It's like, give me those rollerblades, man. I'm gonna zoom around here.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it was probably, looking back, I'm like, that was probably the most significant sports experience that I've had in a life of doing a whole bunch of different sports. Cool. Yeah. Where I'm like 2nd grade to 10th grade playing hockey was huge in my life. So
now, before we started the podcast, I know you talked about football a little bit.
Yeah.
So where did the whole football thing come into play then?
So, and then growing up, my dad was both my parents actually. My mom was our high school tennis coach.
Okay.
And my dad was like our girls basketball coach and like freshman football coach.
Okay, cool.
And so growing up, my whole life, I was always at sporting events. Right. I was the kid under the bleachers throwing popcorn everywhere, and all that stuff. And like at his practices, I would run around like tackle pads, and I was the ball boy and the water boy and all that stuff. Cool. So once I got into high school football, that became like the number one, like most important thing in the whole wide world at that point, which I'm sure a lot of people in any smaller towns can kind of relate to if they're in football, and that's kind of like their thing, and so yeah, that was like a huge deal for me growing up.
Cool. Yeah, I know that's what I put in that little write up is Friday Night Lights, man. And
yeah.
I remember once I got into high school and I didn't go out for football until I played flag football growing up, and I didn't play tackle football until my sophomore year of high school. Then the first JV game, I broke my leg, so basically I didn't play until my junior year. But there was just something. We had some really good teams in Cherokee at the time. Some great athletes, and just there's like a freshness. But dude, there was just like this goal. It's like, dude, we got to get to the playoffs, and there was just always something. Even though we were involved in all kinds of different sports, football was kind of the king at the time in Cherokee. And again, just there's a lot of build up around there, great athletes, and a lot of exciting stuff. Kind of an exciting offense, 5 wide, and it was just like there was something inside me where it's like, dude, I'm putting everything into football, lifting weights. It was all about football, and everything was just football, and it just really drove me throughout the latter years of high school and really gave me an awesome goal, and it was just that camaraderie with the guys of like, hey, yeah, we're playing basketball, yeah, we're wrestling, we're baseball, track, all that, but it always went back to football, and that kind of sounds like that was kind of your experience too.
Definitely. Well, and there's just so many lessons you learn through it, and they're the obvious ones, like the hard work and consistency and all that stuff, like you experience, like even through the off season, like going in and lifting weights, and then there's like the dealing with failure kind of aspect of it. But I think back, I'm like, man, even day to day as a football player, like when you're going to practice every day, you're learning these lessons. And I always think like the very first day you're doing tackling drills, because you've gone all summer, you're lifting weights and stuff, and then you're like, for a few practices, you're just wearing helmets. But then the day you put full pads on and the coach is like, all right, let's see how you do. and there's that fear, and you're feeling it, and you're like lining up, and you're standing in line waiting to either run the ball and get tackled or run up and tackle someone, and there's this fear of like, oh, this is gonna hurt, this is gonna be painful, but then there's also the fear of like, what if I mess up, what if I look stupid, what if they run me over, because you're on the same team, but it's a competition.
Yep, exactly.
And I think just even in those little moments, stepping up to that fear and just kind of accepting it and being like, taking that breath and be like, we got to do this no matter what. Like, whatever happens, happens. Sure. But I got to actually go out and do this. I think that's a huge lesson for kids, especially at that age, to learn, you know, as they're kind of developing their mindsets. And their mindsets can either be healthy or they can be, like, really kind of weak.
Right.
To kind of, like, almost, like, force them through that. And having people realize, like, even though I'm scared in this moment, or I'm afraid, or I'm going to be embarrassed, or anything like that, like, actually being willing to step up to that specific challenge is like huge for people to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's cool. Now, in regards to college, why don't you share a little bit about college life for you, kind of where things started, because there's another intersection between you and me.
Yeah, so I went to Wartburg for a year to play football.
Okay. Which
Wartburg's like a small Division III in northern Iowa. It's super cold. Yep. Like, maybe the coldest place on earth. Who knows? Like,
right.
But, so I went up there. I played D-tackle. It was hilarious. Like, speaking of tackling drills, basically at Wartburg, their D-tackles, they used the little dudes. So I was like 200. I was bigger than I am now, obviously, but like I was like 200 pounds maybe. And they would use the little quick guys to like shoot gaps. That was their strategy. But the O-line would still be like 300 pounds.
Oh yeah, dude.
And so we would start practice every single day with this, like, you'd have a board between you, and it'd probably be like 5 yards long, and whatever, like almost like you can imagine like a 2x4, right?
Yep.
And you line up, and you're facing an O-lineman. It was D-line versus O-line every single day. And it would just be like, all right, who's going to push each other back off this board? And I remember, like, we would get yelled at literally every single day because the D-line would lose. And I was just like, this is just science. Like, you're having 200-pound guys line up against 300-pound guys, like, and be like, who's going to push each other back? I'm like, we're going to lose every time.
Right. Yep.
You know, that's not why you guys recruited us here. Like, that's not what we're doing. But
welcome to being a freshman in college as an athlete, right?
Dude, and like, even though it's Division III, the step up in level from being in high school to being in college, now you're 18 and now you're facing like 22-year-old, 23-year-old guys, and they're just like grown men at that point. Yep. You're like, I'm still a boy.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, man. So, but then after that, that only lasted 1 year. It's expensive, man.
I went to Central. I mean, that's, like I said, that's another unique thing that we have in common is we both went to not the same college, but we were in the same conference and everything. I went to Central, and dude, I don't know what it is up to now, but this has been 8-9 years ago, dude. It was like $45,000 a year.
It's nuts,
just
man.
Insane,
well,
man.
So about halfway through the football season, I was like, okay. I told you I was watching the girls play rugby.
Yeah.
While I was at football practice, I'm like, I think I just want to play rugby because I had played the year before. And so I decided I wasn't going to come back the next year. And so my last game actually was a JV game against Central, at Central. And I just remember, like, it's so weird. This huge important thing in my life for like 7 years at this point, it like ending in such a whimper. And like, here's literally how it ended: is we played a JV game. I played maybe like 10 plays of it because they would rotate everybody in. There was like 8 D tackles who were freshmen. And the very end of the game was a field goal, and Central was going to kick the field goal to win the game, and I was in there, and you were trying to block it.
Right.
And, like, getting through the line and then jumping, and, like, probably in my mind, I'm like, I'm inches away from blocking it, but probably, like, feet away.
Right.
And then just laying on the ground being like, and that's it. Like, now this stage of my life, of my athletic life, is over, and it was weird, man. I'm like, wow, like, it just ended in such an important thing to end in such a weird, like, just anticlimactic way. Was so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, dude. at the snap of the fingers, it's all over.
Yeah.
I literally remember, because track and running used to be a big part of my life when I was younger, and I remember walking off of the track, my last track meet, my senior year of high school, and just walking away and just saying, like, this is it.
Yeah,
like I knew I was gonna go to Central and play football, but dude, since as far back as I can remember, sports was everything that I lived for, man. It's everything that I ate, breathed, slept, trained for, was football, basketball, swimming, everything. And then you're I mean, literally, I was walking away. I'm like, this is it, Quentin. And again, like, I knew I was gonna go play football, but you know, the fun of playing all kinds of different sports and all the friends. It's like it literally at the snap of the fingers, at the blink of an eye, it's over. And that's how anything in life is. And I think that's why it's so important for us to live in the moment and just to enjoy and appreciate every day that we have, because that's something I try to remind myself, Chris, all the time of, is like, today is a gift and today is an opportunity. Because literally at any moment, dude, it's over with. And if I'm not living the way that I want to live and treating people the way that I know I should treat people, it's like, man, how are people going to remember me? Are they going to remember me in that last moment, or are they going to remember me, you know, how I was 10 years ago? It's just, it's so quick.
That's
true.
So quick. That's true. Well, and then you realize, though, you're like, well, if I stay active, there's always going to be things that I'm able to do.
For sure, yeah.
And so instantly just shifting into rugby for me was like, oh yeah, this is a new thing. And like, it's exciting when you're starting something new, because you don't start off like you're not good when you start off.
Right.
And then you get to learn how to be better throughout it. And in rugby, I shifted into more of like a running back type position, which, you know, as a lineman, you never get the ball. You never get to run the ball. So now you're running the ball, and I'm like, whoa, this is a whole new thing. Like, it was cool, man. So I just think, like, and, you know, it's the message I kind of want to promote too, is just like, stay active. Like, you can always find things to do, but it's a lot easier to shift into different activities if you are keeping yourself fit, keeping yourself healthy. You know, because, like, if you just, like, for 10 years decided you weren't going to be active, and then you decided you wanted to, you know, try a half marathon or something like that, for instance, like, it's going to take a lot more work. Like, you can totally do it. You can obviously accomplish it. It's just going to take a lot more to kind of shift into that activity, exactly. You know? And there's a lot more opportunity to, like, accidentally hurt yourself. You know, you're a gym teacher, so I'm assuming you play games with the kids every once in a while.
Every once in a while we'll play games. Yeah. So we spend a lot of time sprinting and burpees.
But I'm saying, like, so if you were like, I'm not going to keep myself in shape, but once a month I'm going to play a basketball game against these, like, teenagers, like, you're going to probably get hurt.
Likelihood is a lot higher.
Yeah, because we'll play a basketball game once a year. Mm-hmm. And even, like, it's just doing an activity I'm not super used to. I wake up the next morning, I'm like, I can't even walk.
Yeah, dude. Basketball is intense, man. Like, there's basketball shape, and then there's not basketball shape. It's
exactly.
It's intense. So that's a great transition. Kind of your focus and promoting staying active, Chris. So you go off to college. You left Wartburg. You went to the University of Iowa. You stayed active throughout college. So where did running come into? Because you also host a podcast called like a Bigfoot Podcast, correct?
Yes.
And I know that you've had a wide array of athletes on there, but I think lately it's been a lot more focused on running and ultra runners and things like that. Is that fair to say?
With the podcast, I mean, ultra running's kind of been the main sport I've been into for the past like 6 years at this point.
Cool.
And so obviously for the podcast, that's kind of, a lot of those people have really cool adventure stories to tell. But for me, in my mind, I was like, if I do a solely, like, if it's only running, like, if that's all I talked about with people every single week, like, I would totally burn out.
Right. Exactly.
And so, the thing with the podcast was, the intent was to be consistent with it. And, you know, and sometimes that means just talking about something completely different that I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. That's, you know, usually based around athletics, usually based around adventure, but it doesn't necessarily just fall in line with, this is a running podcast. Even though, like you said, a lot of the guests do have something to do with that. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day. So
how did you? So your transition out of college, and then how did you transition into running?
Yeah.
And then how have you kind of transitioned into this ultra running? And for the listener that's not coming from your end, is maybe from the 127 Fit podcast, and just explain a little bit what ultra running is for those uninformed.
Yeah, so ultra running, I mean, man, ultra running is just such a crazy sport that there's all sorts of different definitions. I mean, ultra running could be running at 50K, which is 31 miles, which is my favorite event. Or it could be something like running a 200-mile race, which I've never done. And like, that's crazy, man. It could be anything from running the Hard Rock 100 in the San Juan Mountains, which is like super high elevation the whole race. You're going straight up, straight down. Or it can mean running around a track for 24 hours. So it's like there's a wide variety of events in it. Like it's kind of a hard thing to explain.
But it's always an ultra marathon is always over 26.1 miles, right? Like that's the definitive terminology, right?
Yeah.
It's always going to be past 26.1 miles. And 26.1 is just like the typical marathon you might see on TV for the Olympics or something. But then under the category of ultra, it's any distance past 26.1. But then what you're explaining is it's after that, it's just like it's just
wide
all
open.
Kinds of the wild west kind of.
Could be in the desert, could be in the mountains.
Right, exactly.
2 weeks ago, there was the Arrowhead 135.
I heard somewhere in Minnesota.
In Minnesota, in the polar vortex, and it's 135 miles. People were pulling sleds. So
crazy.
I mean, there's a lot to it. Some people don't even include a 50. Like they're like 50K. I don't know if that's an ultra. You know, at this point, like it's building up. I'm like, whoa, But yeah, so like just kind of in a nutshell, I started running really to get in shape for rugby. So I remember there were runs I did from Wartburg in that freezing, like it was cold there in the winter. And I remember leaving my dorm, going out for maybe a 2-mile run. Because I remember like my little iPod shuffle, trying to listen to music,
there you go, dude.
But suffering. Like every step of it sucked. I'm like, what am I doing?
Right.
But rugby, man, the position I was, you run 7 miles a game, about 6 or 7 miles. Like you're constantly, like you have to have that endurance shape along with that explosiveness. You know, because you're always moving around. Like you're never walking in a rugby game, but you're not always sprinting in a rugby game either. So I started doing that, and I would leave my house. I would go for like 3-mile runs, and then once a week I would do like a 5-mile run.
Okay.
And I specifically, like, dude, I forced myself to do this for like 6 months. It did not come easy. It's like I suffered through for every run for like 6 months. Mm-hmm. And then one day, I'm running along. It's like the most beautiful bluebird day. And I can tell you exactly where I was in Iowa City. And I can tell you I was listening to a Beatles song. And it was Dear Prudence. And Dear Prudence's lyrics are literally like, it's a beautiful day. Like, look around and enjoy or something. And so I'm like, all right. And I'm looking around. And I'm like, it is a beautiful day. I am enjoying this. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa. I think I'm enjoying running.
Sweet, man.
And from there, it was just a slow build up, like half marathon. I started teaching in Ankeny, Iowa, and I remember I read the book Born to Run, which this is a common one. So a lot of ultra runners read the book Born to Run, and they're like, oh, I should try this. So I read that book, and then like 2 weeks later, I ran my first marathon just from my school. Like I left at 4 p.m., and I ran down all the roads you were just describing in Iowa through cornfields for 26 miles. And I got back to my car and no one's around. And I do the Rocky thing with my hands up. And I'm like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about that. I just did the hardest thing I've ever done. But I'm so proud of myself and so glad that I did it.
That's
so,
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And then it ended up shifting. We moved to Virginia, and we had like 35 miles of single track trails through the woods.
Okay.
So it shifted into trail running. Like once a week, I would go out there, and that was a whole new thing. Like you're going straight up hills and down hills. Like I was instantly out of breath. I thought I was in good shape until I trail ran, you know? Mm-hmm. And I would come back home, and I'd be sweating, and I'd be covered in spider webs and ticks on, like I'd be pulling ticks off me and stuff. And my wife would just look at me and she's like, what were you doing? I'm like, I was just running through the woods like a Bigfoot. And that's how I came up with that phrase. Perfect. And then from there, just like, that was my thing. Yeah. I loved doing it. I had to do it every day after school.
Awesome.
Reset my mind after working with 14-year-olds. Yeah. You know.
So and you just kind of alluded to it, but so running, I'm assuming, is that outlet for you, just to kind of because you're a husband, you're a dad, you're a middle school teacher. You're a podcaster. You have a lot going on, a lot of responsibility. So I'm assuming running is really that outlet and that kind of that sanctuary for you, just to kind of check out of all the responsibility, all the craziness and chaos that's going on. You can just run, put in your earbuds, whatever, and basically just check out for however you run, and then you come back and you're ready to rock and roll. Is that fair to say? Or?
Yeah, man. I don't know about you, but when 2:30 rolls around or 3 o'clock, when we end our day at school, if I try to go and talk to somebody at that point, my brain is fried.
Right, exactly. Yep.
It's like mentally, I think people don't understand what goes into teaching.
They don't.
Because you have probably like 50 different thoughts in your head all at once about, okay, this is the part of the lesson I'm at. This is the main goal of today. These are the specific questions I should ask. But along with that, at the same time, you're like, that kid in the back's not listening. This kid in the front has raised their hand like 50 times, so I've called on her too much, and like there's just like a billion things going on. And so to take that hour to myself to just get that break and that peacefulness of being outside and running through the woods, and it's really important.
Cool.
Yeah. So
you do run every single day then?
Most days, yeah. Okay. Most days. I mean, I do a bunch of like, I'll lift weights too.
Okay. Good.
And it seems like a lot, but it's all about making it fit into a schedule so it doesn't interfere with family time. Absolutely. So like yesterday and today, I got up at 4 in the morning, Saturday and Sunday, because I wanted to get 2 long runs in. Yeah. And I got home today before anyone was even awake. Right. So.
Well, yesterday morning on your Instagram, I saw you post something about an 18-mile run, and that was like at 6 o'clock in the morning.
It 7? It was 7.
So you had to have been up pretty early, dude.
Yeah. So I left. Well, actually, it was probably 8 because I left at 5. Out my door and just ran around for 3 hours.
Yeah, no, it's cool, man.
Ate some Girl Scout cookies, which I know isn't the most healthy, but
hey, man,
that's the other thing. Dude. That's the thing about ultras too, is like, if you're good at eating and you're good at just like moving forward, you're gonna be able to finish an ultra. Like, I want anyone to know that anyone can do these things. Like I'm not like a special like, you know, it's not special that I run a 50K. It's just like I put the training in, I can eat a lot of food,
right, and
I can suffer for a while and be cool with it.
Right.
So
I want let's talk about let's go down that trail, no pun intended, right now. Yeah. Chris, let's talk about mindset and just mental toughness, whatever words you want to throw out there, because the mentality, the mind is so powerful. And we were talking about David Goggins earlier, and that's kind of his whole thing. And you know, I've heard some other people talk about mindset is everything. Want it from your perspective, running, life, just where you're at. What is the importance of thinking right and just having control over your thoughts and your mind, and the importance of that mental toughness for just moving forward in life in general?
I mean, I think I'm very stuck in my, like, these are my kind of morals or like my base philosophy, and it's basically like, if you say you're gonna do something, you're gonna, like, you need to get it done. So the night before a workout, if I'm like, okay, tomorrow morning my alarm's gonna go off at 4 a.m. and I'm gonna go out and run 6 miles before school starts, if I tell myself that, I have to get it done. Like, it's just kind of like, at this point I've trained myself where it's like, I said it, I'm gonna get it done. Doesn't mean it's like easy by any means. I've been waking up at probably 4 in the morning for like the last like 6 years.
Yeah.
Every time it sucks. Like, every single time I wake up, I'm like, what are you doing?
Right.
And then I'm like, this should be getting easier, you'd think, but it doesn't.
Right.
But it's the fact of, like, you say you're going to do something, you got to honor that. You got to, like, live up to that. So you have to actually do it. And then after that, like, all these lessons, all these really good mindset things, you learn them all through doing these hard events. Whatever the hard event is, if it's hard for you to run a 5K, go do a 5K, because you're going to learn a lesson about yourself that you're going to be able to apply for future events, but also like future just life. You know, I think people are attracted to ultra running because you're intentionally giving yourself hardship. And that way, in the future, when something in life happens that's difficult and out of your control, you know, we all have that happen. But by doing these things beforehand, you can experience, like, how am I going to handle hardship, you know, when it comes up in my life, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, like, you know, you're on mile 40 of a 50-mile race, like, you're experiencing hardship. Yeah. But then also realizing how tough you actually are. Like, you're tough enough to get through this. And you get to this point where you've, like, stripped away everything, and you're, like, kind of your most, like, feral person at that point. Mm-hmm. And to see yourself in that state, and to see how you respond to other people, and how you respond to, like, a challenge when you're at your most, like, emotionally drained, is really cool to see.
Yeah. And that's at your inner core who you are then.
Yeah.
Because you're basically, you're stripped naked. You're in such a distressed state, so to speak, and you're just trying to make it the next step, literally. Yeah. And however you respond in that moment to the people around you, situations, circumstances, the pain, whatever, that's who you are. And if you respond in a way that you don't want to respond, then it's like after that race or after that event or whatever you're doing, you can go back, you can look back on that moment, you can analyze and say, hey, you know what? I responded, I reacted in that situation in a way that I don't want to. And that's, if you can overcome that and realize that and recognize that and move forward, that's how you will mentally and physically grow as a human being, right?
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, for me, I haven't had the moment in a race where I've, like, snapped at somebody in a way that I wouldn't be proud of. I haven't had that moment yet. But so if I feel bad, I just get really quiet. Like, my personality, I'm really, like, positive and happy and stuff. But when I'm drained, I just get, like, to the point where I'm like, okay. It's kind of like the whole, like, if you're not going to say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So I just don't say anything. But
that's smart though, man.
Yeah,
that's smart.
But finding yourself in those moments really lets you understand that about yourself. And like I said, you can get that. Man, my daughter, she did a 1.5 mile run last year, and it was so interesting. She was like 3.5 maybe, and we went, and it was a trail run. It's this really cool series here in Denver called Mountain Goat Kids, and I'm running along with her, and I'm like, what she experienced in that 1.5 miles is exactly what I go through in an ultra marathon. Right. Like, it was like the whole, like, high-fiving people on the trail, like trying to sing songs to get you in a positive mood, to also the last, like maybe 5% of the race just falling apart. Right, and I'm like, wow, like, you can experience this through anything that you find challenging. For me, it's just been going out and doing, like, an ultra marathon is really where I really am able to kind of access this. And I think for me, it's important to do this periodically throughout my life. And along with the importance of having something to train for and to strive for, and, like, a goal you're trying to achieve, for me, it's also about reminding myself of these lessons. Like, you're just like, you line up at the start line, you're like, I'm going to learn some lessons today. I don't know what they are, but we're going to find out, you know? Right. And along with that, I did a race this summer through the desert. It was a stage race, so it was over, like, 6 days. Okay. And it was on the Cocobelly Trail, so it's hot, man. It's
now where is this at?
So Grand Junction to Moab.
So it starts in Colorado then?
Yeah, so it starts in Fruita, which is right by, like, Grand Junction. I have a map on my wall. Okay. And then you cut, like, southwest to Moab, Utah. Okay. But it's through the desert the whole time. You're camping. It's called Desert Rats. It's the best race I've ever done, like, hands down. It's such a quality event. Whereas there was like 25 of us running and probably like 20 staff members.
Oh, wow.
Like doctors, chef, people setting tents up. Like, it was awesome, man. Cool. I would highly recommend it, and I'm doing it again. So I'm doing it again this summer. But there's one day where it's a 40-mile day, and this is like the longest day of the event. So it's 40 miles, but you've already ran 3 previous days of distances that have ranged from, there's one day of 9 miles, but one day of like 38. So you've already done an ultra at this point.
Okay.
And I just remember that whole day just being so intensely focused on what I could control. And it was that lesson of like, control what you can control. Everything that's uncontrollable, like, don't even worry about that. You can't, you know? So I couldn't control the distance. Like, it was always going to be 41 miles. I couldn't control the elevation. We were like climbing mountains the whole day. I couldn't control the heat even, you know? Like, it's going to be as hot as... Like, one guy at the end of the race was like, yeah, I looked at my thermometer on my phone, and it was like up to like 115 degrees. And he was like, did you know that? I'm like, dude, I don't want to know anything. Like, I know it's hot, but like, what is it going to matter? It could be 70 degrees or it could be 115 degrees, and I have to like deal with it. Yep. And so that whole day just being like, I got to control what I can control in that moment, which is how much am I drinking? How much am I eating? My electrolytes. I'm putting sunscreen on. Like, all these, like, I was doing like a mental checklist pretty much that whole day. And it was the best day of the event. It was the longest day, but hands down for me, I was like, I performed at my absolute like best that I've ever performed in a race.
That's awesome, dude.
Because I was just like, what can you control? What can you not control? And just let all that other stuff go and figure out, like, in this moment right now, what can you do? And you're like taking mental checks of how your body feels. So you're like, okay, how am I feeling right now? What is that feeling telling me that I need to do to deal with the heat or the elevation or things like that? So
that's really cool, Chris, because that's something for me with sports and physical training that I think is so valuable, because there are so many lessons that you can learn if you're open to learning them through sport, through physical activity, that will have a huge impact, a huge positive impact in your life. Whether it's, you know, as a dad, a father, or dad, husband, teacher, you know, business person. There's so much to be learned through physical activity, physical training that we can take and apply it to our life, just to make our life that much more better or impactful for other people. Yeah. And I really feel like, you know, like you talked about it earlier with the importance of some of the things you learned through sport when you were in high school, and you said, you know, I really feel like this is important for kids to learn, and I really feel like there are some lessons that you really can only learn, or things that you can only experience through sport or through physical activity, that you're not going to get through music, you're not going to get through some other extracurricular activity or something like that. Not putting anything else down, for me personally, I have learned so much. And physical activity and physical training and sport has meant so much to me personally. It's just like, it's so invaluable. You know what I mean? Like, there's just certain lessons you're not going to learn unless you go through that physicality. Yeah. And a lot of it goes back to the mind. Like, I wouldn't be the individual I am today if I hadn't played sports growing up, if I hadn't continued to go through that physical training up to you know, being 31 years old. It's just, it's so valuable.
Yeah, but I also think the lessons you learn do fade a bit. Like, for me, when I do these events, the lessons are really there for like the first month. Right. You know? And then they slowly fade over time, and you're like, I gotta do something else that's challenging now, because I need to relearn these. Like, for example, the biggest lesson I took out of that, besides the whole control what you can control, that was a very personal lesson. But if you talk to anybody who did that race, we all came away with this feeling of like a community. And you really learn, like, how am I affecting others, and how are they able to affect me? And we, over 6 days, we went from these strangers who didn't know each other to like this tight-knit group who was helping each other survive the desert. I mean, there's stories from it of people like sacrificing their last sip of or like cup of water for someone else because they needed it more.
Right.
And that feeling of connection, I mean, dude, as I left that for about a month or two after, like, I felt it everywhere I went. I was like in the grocery store and I was like looking at someone I hadn't met, and I was like, I had this feeling of like, if we were in the desert together, we would take care of each other. And it was this cool, like, reaffirming belief about humanity. And not to say I still don't feel that now, but like, it's definitely faded a bit, which is why I'm excited this summer to go back and do it again, mostly for that. I mean, the challenge is cool. You're running through like the prettiest area, maybe in the like United States,
right.
But you're also you're forming a community, which is so cool. Because I was thinking with teaching, I'm like, man, we're a group of teachers and we all have the same goal, and like, this is no different than us going through this desert together. It's just, instead of a desert, we're trying to figure out how to talk to 12 to 14 year olds.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, if we can figure that out and like understand how we are a community and how we can be perfect for each other, like that's like this huge lesson. But yeah, man, I mean, they're invaluable. And I'm even watching my kids now. I mean, my 4-year-old, we're ice skating every week, so that's what we're going to do this afternoon. Is I'm going to take her ice skating, and she's not good. Like, she struggles. Like, you know, ice skating's hard.
I've never done it, dude.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd fall right on my butt if I tried. So.
Ice skating's super hard, and
sure.
for her to realize that, though, and to realize, like, well, if you keep practicing, if you keep trying, like, you're going to get better little by little every single time. Like, that's invaluable. And you're right, like, I think you can get that in certain areas, like music, learning to play an instrument is probably the same, but for whatever reason, sports just make these lessons like stick out in our minds.
Right.
Which is why it's so, like, for me, I'm like, I'm going to be a lifelong athlete. Like, that's the plan. Even if it means by the end of my, like, when I'm in my 80s, like, if I'm just playing like ping pong, like, I'm cool with that. Right. I want to play ping pong.
Just being active. Go
yeah.
to your thing. Stay active. That's cool. So let's talk about being a teacher.
Yeah.
Because that's, again, a commonality between yourself and myself. Not only being teachers, but being middle school teachers, which seems to be a whole nother monster in itself. But how did you? Where did you start thinking about becoming a teacher? Because for me, I didn't go to college to become a teacher. My bachelor's degree is in exercise science. I wanted to be a personal trainer, own my own gym, kind of that whole thing. And there was a shift in my, I'd say, early to mid-20s where there was just some different things that happened in my life personally, where I had some more opportunities to reach out to kids, help kids that were struggling, all this different stuff that really kind of opened up my heart and my eyes to the need for adults to really just pour into the next generation and to kind of teach them the right way and the right things. So what was kind of the impetus for you to start thinking about becoming a teacher and then actually following through becoming a teacher, and kind of what's that experience been like for you, Chris?
Well, it seems like it's actually been a fairly gradual thing where, I mean, both my parents growing up were teachers, so it had always been around. And I always joke, people are like, why'd you become a teacher? And I always joke, and I'm like, both my parents told me not to be a teacher, and so that was my rebellion. I'm like, you can't tell me what to do, Mom. I'm gonna be a teacher, which is like not really. I mean, that's just a joking answer.
Joke. Yeah,
but I don't know, man. I think it's really important how you can affect people.
Absolutely.
Like, you have a limited amount of time on Earth. Like, people, you can affect them in ways that you don't even notice. You know, like, if you go into work every day and you're super positive, like, a kid might... I've had kids who have come in at 7 in the morning and they'll stand right by my shoulder and they'll tell me literally everything horrible that happened in their lives since they left school the day before. And like, you have to realize, like, whoa, like, people are going through tough times. And I can affect them based on my attitude, but also, like, the atmosphere you're able to build as a teacher. Like, if you're building a classroom where it's safe and comfortable and the kids feel like they're going to have a good time, you know? That's huge, especially in middle school. Like, middle school is a lot of social, emotional stuff.
Exactly.
That they're going through, this shift of, like... And I teach 7th grade. So 7th grade is the year where they start the year as kids, and they end the year as teenagers. Like, you can tell a difference after spring break. They come back, and you're like, whoa, you have an attitude now. Weird. But, yeah, so, like, being able to pass off these messages, not just by telling them, because really, like, kids are going to learn more through experience and how you handle situations. That's, like, invaluable. And I love it so much, man. I wouldn't do anything else. It doesn't even feel like I go into work every day.
I'm right with you, dude.
Yeah, like, most days I'm like, okay, so this is just the part of my day where I go to school and get to teach kids about fun stuff, and we get to have discussions, and I get to help them through hard times if they're having hard times, or, you know, I don't know, man. It's a great career.
It's rewarding.
Yeah,
dude. It's rewarding. That's what it is. It really is.
It is, yeah. And I coached a little bit when I was in college. Coached high school or freshman football, and that was the same thing. Like, that's where I actually, because I was coaching football, and then I was in a different major. I was going to do like pharmacy, which I would have hated now that I think about it, or physical therapy, which I probably would have liked a little bit better. But after coaching that first year, I was like, man, I think I really want to be a teacher after that. Cool.
So you did end up then graduating from college with with a teaching degree and all that.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I ended up like going for an extra year and a half.
Okay.
To Iowa and got my master's in teaching.
Awesome.
And then from there, I've had experience in like a super big variety of schools of, you know, like really progressive, like focused on these really cool learning strategies, to a school where it was a lot harder and you had to focus a lot on like classroom management, and both the experiences were like absolutely invaluable, and I'm so glad I had them. So
cool. Now you're a science teacher, is that correct?
And you get to blow stuff up as a science teacher.
Well,
so you get to cheat.
I was just going to ask you, what's your favorite unit to teach in science?
Oh man, so I mean, not to like make this just about health, but we do like the human body stuff.
Okay.
And cool. I think in 7th grade, a lot of the kids have heard about a lot of things, but they don't fully understand how certain things work.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, they know about the heart, but how does the heart work? Or like this week, we're going into the main question for the first 2 days is going to be, what exactly does oxygen do in the human body?
Okay, cool.
And like, you get to show them that they don't know, which is fun. And you get to be like, oh, what does oxygen do in the human body? And they'll be like, well, you need it to live. You need to breathe it. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but like, why? What does it do? And so they get to like really kind of get this understanding of like, there's so much more to learn, you know, which is fun. And then when you see it click, that light bulb go off, like, it's almost addicting. You're like, wow, I just made this kid learn somehow.
Absolutely. No, it's just going back to what I said a few minutes ago. It's so rewarding. These kids, which is something I have to remind myself all the time of, is Quentin. These kids are literally the next generation.
Yeah.
They are the next teachers. They're the next police officers, firefighters,
Yeah.
doctors. Like, you might have the next president of the United States in one of your classes throughout your teaching career. You don't know how your actions and your words and the environment that you create through your teaching, how that's going to positively or negatively affect a child.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, honestly, dude, I remember 0.00001% of anything that I ever, sat in a class and was taught from kindergarten all the way through my senior year in college. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that you just memorize, take a test, and you forget about it. But a lot of what I remember from school are, interactions with teachers, interactions with friends, interactions with, different athletic type stuff. And it's like those moments with people, that's what you remember.
Yeah.
And it's either you're going to have an overall positive impact on, the next generation, or you're going to have kind of just maybe in between or negative.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's like our words and our actions are very, very powerful. And every day you walk into that school building, there are hundreds and hundreds of eyes on you watching and ears listening to you.
Yeah, you gotta be aware. It's you got to be not in zombie mode.
Right, exactly.
It forces you not to be. And I think that was the link to ultra running I was kind of trying to make, is like, you got to be present all the time because you have to understand how you're coming across. And you can affect people without even knowing it. Like, to link back to running for a second, I was in Virginia and I was just running down this trail. This is like the coolest moment of running I've ever had in my life. And it was just this random day I was out going for like a 6-mile jog. And I'm running down this trail, and this like older guy's coming at me, and he was like riding his bike, and he stops me, and I was like, oh, I hope I wasn't in his way or something. And he gets off his bike, and he like shakes my hand. He's like, I saw you out here a week ago, and you were running. And he's like, you just look so happy and energetic. And he's like, I used to be a runner back in my like 30s and 40s. And he's like, so I saw you were running, you were doing this thing. And then the next week I went out for my first run in like 10 years. That's and awesome. I was like, whoa, like I almost started crying. I'm like, dude, that's so crazy. Like I did, like without even realizing I was doing anything. You know, had this effect on this guy, and then in turn, like, this guy totally affected me. Like, I'll remember that for the rest of my life. I'll never see that guy again. Right. Like, I have no idea. I don't even know who it was. Like, I couldn't describe him to you, but, like, that feeling and that message he left with me, I'm like, whoa, and it taught me that. I was like, wow, this is really important. Like, how you show up every moment is what eventually adds up to your life, you know? Like, absolutely. It's all those little moments that really are the ones that count and the ones that matter.
That's powerful. Yeah, man. That's really cool. I appreciate you sharing that. So let's talk about for a minute here, because you're a dad, you're a husband. What is being a husband? What does being a dad mean to you? And just kind of like, how does all of that family time? Because I know you mentioned earlier the importance of fitting your running and things of that nature into your family time and everything else you got going on. But what does the family aspect look like for you, Chris? And what's the importance of being a husband and being a dad to you personally?
Yeah, well, being a dad means you do like triple the amount of chores. Right. That's what that means. No,
until they get older, right? And then you can hopefully make them do it.
Well, we'll see, man. We'll see.
Or is that just a fantasy?
That might be a fantasy. Okay, we'll see. But really, I mean, it means more than anything in the world to me. Like, that's the most important thing, like, ever. Like, I always tell my wife, I'm like, I had no goals growing up. Like, I didn't have any goals. Like, I never wanted to, like, be, like, a CEO of a company or, like, whatever. I didn't have any goals business-wise. I just knew, I was like, I've wanted to be a dad, and I've wanted to be a husband. Like, that's it.
That's awesome, dude.
That's and I wanted to have, like, a happy family life. Like, drama-free, like, just happy family life. Pass off the good lessons to my kids. Like, I remember we were ice skating, me and my wife, like, when we were first starting dating, we were ice skating, and I saw this dad, like, playing, like, passing a puck to his daughter, and I was like, that's what I want to do, like, that's it, so, I mean, dude, it's completely, like, it's indescribable almost. Like, it's hard to describe what it's like to be a dad, because it's all, like, everything, like, all the emotions, like, there are ups and downs. Like, I told you, I was a stay-at-home dad for a year, and that was tough, man. That was, like, the toughest job in the world. But at the same time, you're, like, every week you have some sort of experience where you're, like, life can't get better. You're, like, my kids will do something or say something, and I'll look at them, and I'll be like, life cannot get better than this moment. And then, like, a week later, they'll do something or say something, I'm like, oh, it got better. I don't know how. How did that happen? And I think, like, obviously that's the most important time, but I think being able to be active and healthy, like, ties into that. Where it's like, I'll go out, like, this morning. I went for a run this morning because I knew getting my time in before, like, in a way that didn't affect the family, like, that's going to make me a more patient, calm, like, better dad for this day.
Absolutely.
But yeah, man, it's awesome. But it's funny too, though, because, talking about that 6-day ultra marathon, like, I was away from him for 6 days, and obviously, like, I was thinking about him the whole entire time. And so I'm going from, I finished the last day's a marathon. So you run a marathon, and I'm so tired, and we ran it like fairly hard. And I get to the finish line, and they're all there. And it's the greatest moment of my life, right? Like, I'm hugging them. So great. And then instantly you have to switch into dad mode. Right. So instantly I'm carrying one of them. Because they don't
care, right?
Yeah.
They don't care that you just ran, the longest leg of a 6-day race. They don't care, do they? They're living in the moment because they're little kids.
So, like, instantly I'm carrying one, like, feeding her. She's having a fit. And I'm like, oh, man. And everybody who did the race with me, who only knew me as, the guy who was doing this race.
Right.
They're like, whoa, we saw you flip into dad mode like the second you cross the finish line. I'm like, hey, it's what you got to do,
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, just as you're sharing that, man, and again going back to, it's so rewarding, isn't it, man? Like you're running the race, you're doing something that you love. It's kind of your outlet and all that. You're connecting with all these people, and you know that at the finish line is going to be your wife, your kids, and like. Dude, that's more.
Oh yeah.
That's like the most amazing award. That's cooler than some medal or whatever other award you might get for running or pat on the back. Like, right? I mean, it's just it's rewarding.
Oh yeah.
That love that is waiting for you, and they don't care. Like that, your dad. Yeah. Like you're not a runner. You're not a science teacher. You're your dad, and they're gonna puke on you. They're gonna whatever give you a hug. Right? Yeah. I mean, it's just that's so cool.
And also like. For them to see that, for them to see like you did this thing, and they don't know how hard it is. Like they're 4 and 2, like they don't understand how many hours went into training for that, or like in the moments where I was like, where it was hard, where it was like you're just dragging yourself forward. They don't get that, but they do get. They like it is passed off. Like I had to work hard for this, and. It helped me accomplish this thing that seemingly was impossible. Mm-hmm. And I think that's good for them to see that in like a role model. Absolutely. And my wife's amazing. Like she'll do that all the time. Like, she's worked so hard in all sorts of areas in her life. And so they get that from both of us in like different ways. Yeah. And I'm like, that's what's going to ultimately, hopefully lead to their success. Cause that's the other thing that's like parenting is kind of like an ultra marathon. Like, you have to live in that moment. You have to be positive in the moment because you're not sure how, like, the end is nowhere in sight. You know what I mean? Right. Where I'm like, I want them to be good people when they're in their 30s and 40s and 50s and, like, their whole entire life. But, like, that end is nowhere, like, that's nowhere in sight right now. And so at times it can be, like, I don't know. At times it's frustrating because you're like, I hope this works out, but I'm not sure if it will. But just being like having faith that like if you are being your best self as often as possible, which isn't all the time, like there are moments.
We all have moments, dude. We're imperfect beings.
But if you're trying your best, if you're like striving to be your best in those moments, like eventually it's gonna work out.
Absolutely.
So
well, and it goes back to what you talked about a lot earlier is controlling what you can control, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so if you are trying to be the best version of yourself today, dude, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
And that will
totally
pay dividends, valuable dividends in the long run because, being that example, being that leader, being someone to follow in your home, the kids are going to model that.
Yeah.
Because I always talk to people about, I don't care, where you came from or whatever your home environment was, we are all, even right now, man, we're both in our early 30s. We are both still, as grown men, we are still both products on some level of our home environment.
Yeah.
However many years ago it was that we lived at home, and for the 16, 17, 18, 19 years we lived, with our parents and in our hometowns, like we are products of that. Yeah. Now we can change that. We can take a different route. We don't have to do what our parents did and all that. But until the day we die, we still got our mom and our dad, some sort of their genes inside of us. And we're part of both.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
We can do whatever we want to do with our lives, and it's up to us. But again, it's like we're products of our home environment. Yeah. And that's something I also think about when I'm teaching is like this kid who is not listening to me right now or is being a complete goofball, knucklehead, being rebellious, all this stuff that's inside making me very frustrated. Like I have to step out of that those feelings and those emotions say, hey, Quentin, they are modeling what they see and hear in their home environment. I teach in an area of Colorado Springs that's, quote unquote, a rougher part of Colorado Springs, and we have just a lot of kids with just a lot of issues, which, I mean, I don't care where you teach. If you're in the suburbs or in the inner city, there's a lot of kids with a lot of issues everywhere. Yeah. But my point is that it's like I've got to realize, like, hey, they are repeating and living out what they are seeing and hearing at home. Yeah. Whatever adults are in their life, like, they're modeling that. Yeah. They don't know that. They're just responding because that's how they see mom, dad, the adults in their life responding. Yeah. And so that's where I have to kind of try to step out of that moment and just be like, all right, dude, they're a product of their home environment. Yeah. They don't even know what they're saying. They don't even know what they're doing right now. Just continue to encourage them, love them, and continue Quentin to be that example and that leader, and just show them love,
That's the idea of, like, the blank slate, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, the idea is, an artist shows up and there's just this blank canvas in front of them, and they can do whatever they want with it. Right. And so the idea of blank slate is like, you just, if you try to do every moment like it is a blank slate, like, even if you're in a situation you're really frustrated, if you just take a second, you're like, okay, like, this is a whole new moment right now. Like, I can act however I want, and I can completely change how this situation is going to turn out based on just if I, like, take a second to be like, reset, let's approach this from a different angle, I guess. Yeah. So
okay, so we've been going for over an hour, so I want to wrap things up here. Chris, just a couple of questions. Has there been, and this can be in the running world, throughout college, whatever, answer it however you would like, but has there been one person, one individual that has had a profound impact on the man that you are today?
I mean, obviously my parents, like you just said. That's huge. My wife, she's been through a lot. We've been through difficult times, and watching how she's been able to handle that and she's been able to be brave has just been, like, incredible to see that. Cool. And I think that's really made me into the man that I am today. I'm trying to think. Like, I mean, it's because, like you said, there's so many different areas, like, different hats you put on. Right. And so in different areas, there are, like, there's like, teaching, there's certain people I definitely look up to. Right. Being a dad, I remember seeing how people interacted with their kids as I was growing up too, that, like, really did affect me.
What about, like, in the running world? Is there somebody that you really, I don't want to use the word, like, idolize, hey man, that person is so cool. I love their vibe. I love what they're doing. I mean,
I'll tell you. So my friend Thomas Mullins, he's, first of all, he's, like, the coolest dude you'll ever meet. He's this dude from Texas. He ran our whole stage race this summer in a cowboy hat because he's contractually obligated, I think, as a Texan. But he's just so cool. Like, I honestly think most of us had this amazing experience as, like I said, a community coming together. Mm-hmm. And I think he was the person that really instantly brought everyone together. Awesome. Like, he was so welcoming, so friendly. And then you watch that dude race, and, like, he becomes super focused. Sweet. Like, because I ran a lot of the last few days, I ran a lot of the race with him. And to see this guy who's so positive, such, like, an extrovert, like, talking to everyone and joking and all this stuff. And then, like, the race goes on, and he's, like, focused now. And it's not that he's not friendly. Like, that's not the case at all. I'm just saying, like, you saw him go into race mode. Right. And it was impressive, man. Cool. It was super cool. And he taught me so much. Because he had done, like, the Bigfoot 200. And he's done a whole bunch of stage races at this point. So, just, like, I think you should go into any situation like a sponge. And you're just learning from anyone Absolutely. You can. And that experience the last couple of days, like, I just learned so much about racing from him, about how to do these long events in ways that were smart, but also, like, just observing him the whole week. And we ran another race together last September, and he's in the area every so often, so we'll hang out then. Cool. And just learning how he interacts with people and how he is able to kind of like just be that positive shining star, like that really stood out to me. So running wise, I'd say like definitely, I mean, and then like I want to like that race in general, just like so many people in it, but like I just felt like watching him race was pretty incredible. Sweet. Yeah, man.
So in the area of Denver, Colorado, however again you want to answer it, just give me quickly, myself, the listeners, if they're living in Colorado, if they're going to come visit, what's one place that they need to check out in regards to running?
Ooh, okay. Does it have to be in like Denver area?
No, okay. Colorado, whatever.
I mean, Boulder's incredible. They have, I don't even know how many miles of trails.
It's legit.
It's crazy, man. There's like so many miles of trails in Boulder.
Right.
You can get if you climb Bear Peak has probably the best view on the Front Range.
Bear Peak.
It's when you're going into Boulder, you see these two big peaks.
Okay.
One of them's Bear Peak, one of them's South Boulder. I mean, they're both great, but Bear Peak's really cool too because you get to the top and the last like 20 feet is this little rock scramble. So It's not scary by any means, but you do get that little thrill of like
it's different, it's unique,
using your hands and stuff. So that place for sure. I love going up to Nederland. And there's a lot there I haven't explored. I'm looking I have a map right there. The door is blocking it, but it's all the trails I've ran. I've highlighted.
Oh, sweet.
And Nederland is really, really cool. And there's a lot of actual high alpine stuff that's only an hour and a half away from Denver.
Okay.
So you can go up there and get really far back into the wilderness,
Sweet.
Which is fun.
Very cool. All right, so the last thing, Chris, is there something that you wish I would have asked you, or is there something maybe that is just really deep in your heart and your soul that you kind of want to leave the listener that's just like, hey man, this is my thing, this is my jam, this is what it's all about for me, and I want the listener to know about it or to hear about it.
Well, first I was hoping that this would get you to sign up for a 50K.
Me, man.
Because
I know you're.
I joke with my
crazy, dude.
with my podcast. I'm like, I think that's my only goal.
Get people to sign up for 50K.
Well, because I think 50K is like this intro to adventure, an intro to being out and being comfortable in the wilderness. Being comfortable on trails, because there's, it's a event that will only last during the day. It's not going to last 2 days or whatever. It's going to last one day. You're going to be out there. You're going to face a lot of internal struggle. But by getting through it, you're going to be like, whoa, look how much I was able to learn. And I think anyone can do it. I think that's the crazy thing, man. I don't know if people hear about ultra running, I think they're imagining these tiny, skinny little ultra runners, and that's definitely there. Some people are super fast, they have the perfect running bodies.
Right.
But it's body shapes of all types, and it's ages of all types. And you'll be in a race. I remember my first 50 miler in Virginia. I'm running along, and this is probably mile 40, so I'm feeling terrible. And this guy passes me, and my ego instinct at first is that guy shouldn't be passing me. He didn't look like he was in great shape. And I was like, no, dude, it's not about being in shape. It's about who's the toughest one out here.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think if people just go and observe, they're gonna realize oh, they're I could do this. I really think they could do that. But lesson wise, I mean, try something hard. And you'll find a way to get through it, and you'll surprise yourself. Really, I mean, you can do so much more than you possibly could even fathom.
Amen to that.
And all it takes is consistent effort. You just got to be consistent. Just show up every day and get it done. It might not be the prettiest. I'll go out and run 6 miles during the week and after school, and I've done this for 7 years at this point, and some days it's still those 6 miles are way harder than anything I've ever done. Just because for whatever reason that day I'm having a bad day, but it's about showing up and getting through it. So
cool. Very
man.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that,
dude. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, not a problem. So I just want to give you an opportunity. Again, you host your own podcast called like a Bigfoot Podcast. So go ahead. If people want to listen to your podcast, where can they find it?
Yeah.
Where can they reach out to you? things of that nature, go ahead.
Yeah,
and share,
so Like Bigfoot, it's on iTunes, SoundCloud, a lot of the podcast apps. It's all about various adventures and athletes and mindsets. A lot of the stuff we were talking about today, it's really cool. Like, I think you have like a very similar message that you're trying to promote. And really, at the end of the day, it's just about promoting goodness. Like, you find stuff on the internet can get pretty negative.
Yep.
But hearing these people who have done really cool, interesting things, and they've learned these awesome lessons, I think it's important for us to hear. And I like the podcast format, because if you just talk to someone who finished a 200-mile race, or if you just see them online, right? Like, if I just go on Instagram and I'm like, this person finished 200 miles, you're like, holy crap, like, whoa, that person's amazing. But you don't think about, like, step by step by step, like, what did it take to get there?
Right.
What do they have to go through? What are the peaks and valleys of that journey? Mm-hmm. And I think through sharing adventure stories, you can see those peaks and valleys. And I think it makes us realize, like, we're all, like, they're just like me, you know? Absolutely. Like, I could do this too if I committed myself to it. Mm-hmm.
So Instagram,
I have all of them, Twitter, Facebook. I try my best at social media, but at the same time, like, I don't want to be on social media all the time. Right. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
But it's Like a Bigfoot on all of them.
Okay.
You can see pretty pictures of me running. And then recently I've been doing yoga for 100 days.
Oh, cool.
And I just laughed because I'm like, I feel like my yoga pictures are realistic. Where it's like, I'll have the kids in the bathtub giving them a bath, or the picture won't be them in the bathtub, but it'll be like me in the hallway. Like, they'll, like, as they're doing a bath, I'm trying to do 15 minutes of yoga in this tiny hallway, and like, and so I take a picture of the hallway, and you just see like dirty socks out. I'm like, this is what it is.
It's real life, dude, right? Raw and real.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not on a beach doing like a sweet pose. It's just me, you know, standing on my head next to a cartoon playing in my living room.
Yeah. Cool,
so, yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. I just want to thank you, Chris, for hanging out with me. Appreciate you inviting me into your home for going on probably an hour and a half, something like that. It's just, like we were talking about before we turned on the podcast, it's just like the podcast platform, just in regards to connecting with people that you definitely wouldn't otherwise connect with. It's just cool. Yeah. It's really cool. So thank you for your time. Thanks for the hospitality, man. It's really appreciated. 127 Fit podcast listeners, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram at 127 Fitness. Facebook is at Quentin Vars, and then I also have the at 127 Fitness Facebook page. Website, which is just some of my writings, it's just blogs, 127fitness.com. And something that I would just really encourage all of you to do, however you're listening to this, if it's through the Podbean app or iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, please like, subscribe, share, and then specifically for the iTunes app, please leave a review. That just really helps more people be able to find it and listen to it, and hopefully get positively impacted through the guests that I have on here. And then if you guys are listening to this and you think you might be a cool guest to be on here, have a cool story to share, or you know somebody, a friend, family member, coworker, something of that nature that you think might be a good guest, you can reach out to me through email, and the email is 127fit@gmail.com. And again, as always, I just want to thank all of you listeners for hanging out with myself and my guests. It's just so cool to have this podcast and be able to connect with people through social media, specifically through Instagram, meet up with them, and then give them the opportunity to share their story and some of the lessons they've learned through fitness and through life. So thank you so much for taking time out of your guys' busy schedule to hang out with me, and today specifically hanging out with Chris. So per usual, I'm going to leave you guys with Proverbs 24:10, which states, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. This time until next time, I will catch you guys later.